So we just finished this class with Professor Hausman, who was teaching us about why countries are rich, or rather why countries are poor, unequal and volatile. And it's been a very immersive class as well as an eye-opening class as well. So Professor Ricardo Hausman was a former president of the Inter-American Development Bank and one of the most senior officials in the World Bank. And prior to taking his class, I came into the course essentially thinking that Africa was a victim. We're a victim of colonialism, of slavery, of neocolonialist efforts and poor leadership that keeps us down. But over the course of the last 12 weeks, listening to Professor Ricardo, reading the materials, I have come to realize that Africa's problem, yes, is underpinned by this historicity as well as by the ineffective states that many Africans live under. But more importantly, it's really been driven by our inability to raise incomes for our people. Raising incomes for people is tied to giving them the skill set, the know-how to create the goods and services that other parts of the world need. And that's why you keep on seeing that there's a consistent lack of dollars in many of our markets. And because of this lack of dollars, our inability to earn dollars keeps us with ongoing devaluation of our various currencies, making us poor all the time. So my specific case study was an analysis comparing China to Nigeria. And it was very interesting to see that in 1960, Nigeria's income per capita was higher than that of China. But today, Nigeria has remained exactly where we were in 1960, even though our population has increased by almost 4 times. And as a result, China has overtaken us, and they're currently earning more than 6 times what we currently earn as income per capita. And as I explored the Growth Atlas from the Growth Lab that Professor Hausman runs, I realized that Nigeria's export basket has remained exactly as it was in 1960. We're still exporting commodity products, so petroleum, agricultural commodities, all of that stuff. Meanwhile, China has gone from primary commodity exports into more complex products. So the integrated circuits, computers, phones, essentially have become the manufacturing hub across for many parts of the world. And they've also diversified their export partners. So they've exported and now exporting beyond just Asia. They're exporting big trade partner to the US, to Europe, to the Americas, to Africa, to Oceania. Meanwhile, Nigeria's export partners has remained the same. It's the UK, it's the US, it's Europe, right? So in a way, we have agency in why we are poor, why Nigeria and Africa is poor. We have not worked hard enough to diversify our know-how. We've not worked hard enough to grow the complexity or improve the complexity of the products that we know how to make, and that ultimately it's us. And that's a big learning point that I've taken away from this last 12 weeks with Professor Hausman, and there was this question he asked in the class: as a public leader, what would you want to do for your people? You want to give them better education? You want to give them better healthcare? You want to give them better security? But at the heart of this, there's the need for money. And to do all of this, you need dollars, right? So why not prioritize the policies that gives your people the dollars they need to be able to afford a better life? And at the heart of all of this is really the reason why many African countries are poor. We're not making enough. The products we're making are not complex enough. We're not exporting and selling enough to the rest of the world. We're not exporting and selling to more people. There's this conversation recently that has come about why is it that Africa all the time, when we run out of foreign currency like the dollars, and the state is facing huge fiscal deficits, as you've seen with Ghana, what we need to do at the end of the day is to head off to the IMF and the World Bank, and then they tell us how to sort of restructure the economy and all that. And people complain that why is it that in bad times African countries are not able to get good price loans in the international market, and how the system is stacked against us. And in the course, one of the things we explored is the reason why we cannot get good prices, even though, like, if you think about the green growth agenda now, why is it that most of the green projects are not taking place in Africa, even though Africa has all of the solar, all of the wind, all of the hydro that is required to power the world and to make products that can be exported globally? Why are we not able to get the capital that is required to at decent prices that is required to set up green projects on the continent in a way that is sustainable? Average cost of capital is anywhere from 24% all the way to 50%. Meanwhile, in the US here and in the Europe, where they don't even have as much solar or wind, they can get capital costs at about 8%. So people argue that things are stacked against us. But in reality, when we explored it in the class, the reason why it's stacked against us is because we have a history of growth and contraction in our GDP. And that growth and contraction in GDP means that even if you're taxing a specific size of the GDP and taking that away as taxes to the government, the fact that this grows up and down all the time, because we're mostly selling commodities, and these commodities have commodity cycles that go up and down into the international market, it means that the tax base, of which, by the way, many African countries don't even tax enough, but of those who tax, right, the underlying financial model is saying that if your GDP is going up and down, and you're charging a specific tax amount, it means that the tax rate with which you're able to take taxes as a government to repay back these loans is also going up and down. The amount of tax you can collect is going up and down. And so your risk as a government is being able to repay back a loan that you get from the international market is high, and that's why it's priced into the cost of capital. So ultimately, we have the original sin as well as historically of not being able to have currencies that are reliable or people look forward to having in the rest of the world. So we have to issue or take debt in United States dollars or euros or in foreign currencies, and that's the original sin. And on top of that original sin, there is the fear that there's so much conflict that happens that is not predictable. There's contractions and growth from time to time in the economies, so it increases the risk perception of many African countries. And so ultimately, what ends up happening is that we're not able to access capital for many things at the pricing that we want. So ultimately, to fix the issue for African countries, we need to focus on consistent growth. There was something he said, Professor Hausman said at the beginning of the class. He was looking at how is it that China's growth year on year from 1990 or so has been consistent. Although there's been some decline recently, but it's been consistent. And it's the compounded increase, the compounded growth that makes the biggest difference. Like if you're growing 1% year on year, it's better than growing 1 year 10%, growing down the next year by 5%, growing another year by 5%, etc. It's better for you not to have that volatility. It's better for you to grow consistently year on year. And so that requires a steadfastness in terms of how we do our policy planning and implementation. It requires a sense of us as people, as countries, to save. So, for example, why does Nigeria not have a large sovereign wealth fund that can cushion the ups and downs? There is a sovereign wealth fund, but it's not large enough to cushion us from the ups and downs of the commodity markets. So these are the things that we explored in the class with Professor Hausman. And ultimately, for many of us, especially in the private sector, we also have a role to play in terms of improving life for our peoples, right? We're creating jobs. We need to make sure those jobs pay a living wage. Like for us now, we have a policy to ensure that no one in our company is earning lower than the poverty line. As private sector people, we need to do that. On top of that, as private sector entrepreneurs, we need to think about ways in which we can expand our businesses to export so that we can earn export dollars for our countries. And the governments need to support us and work with us so that we can also help the governments diversify and earn more export dollars and create the jobs and give more back to our various societies. It's been very, very insightful. I cannot say how much I have learned. It's been like a lot, and it's just the kind of classes you take that it's like really changes your worldview. You come in thinking you're the victim, and that's what he was saying in the last class today. He was like, hey, take yourself seriously, go out into the world as an agent, as a hero, And he wrote